Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating collision of heavy industry, international trade law, and cutting-edge artificial intelligence. We're going to break down how a massive geopolitical logistics crisis is literally being solved by pocket-sized technology. It's an incredible story about how physical, messy waste is being transformed into a highly structured, high-value digital asset. Let's get right into it.
Here's our roadmap for today's deep dive. We'll be looking at the cross-border waste crisis, how Edge AI works on the Pixel 11, 95 Wood's Digital Refinery workflow, automating USMCA compliance, the massive value shift of data as product, and finally, Ontario's circular bioeconomy future.
All right, part one, the cross-border waste crisis, where logistics and geopolitics collide. To really understand why this tech solution is such a game changer, we first need to grasp the sheer macro scale of the physical and political friction happening right now at the Ontario-Michigan border.
3.46 million. That is a number of tons of municipal solid waste that Ontario exports to Michigan landfills every single year. It's a staggering volume of physical material constantly flowing through one single international corridor. And relying on that pipeline, it's suddenly become a massive liability. To put that 3.46 million tons into perspective, Ontario's trash accounts for over 14% of all waste buried in the entire state of Michigan. When nearly 15% of a state's landfill capacity comes from a foreign country, you can imagine how quickly that becomes a massive regulatory bottleneck and a geopolitical target. Because of this, we're staring down what industry insiders are calling a capacity cliff. The pressures are converging from literally all sides. From Washington, you've got serious trade friction, including proposed Trump-era tariff threats on the USMCA framework. At the exact same time, you have Premier Doug Ford's strict OREG 347 rules and the CRCIL levy pushing domestic waste diversion locally in Ontario. If nothing changes, Ontario's own domestic landfill capacity will be completely exhausted by 2034. The traditional way of managing this waste is fundamentally breaking down.
Which brings us to part two, Edge AI on the Pixel 11, the micro-enabler. Because the solution to this giant international logistics problem isn't building bigger dump trucks, it's edge computing. Specifically, the micro-technology sitting inside the Google Pixel 11 Pro.
To understand how a smartphone fixes a border crisis, we have to look at the software driving it. The secret sauce here is TurboQuant. It's a two-stage compression algorithm that basically acts like a high-speed digital cheat sheet. By transforming vectors into polar representations and applying a highly advanced mathematical filing system called quantized Johnson-Lindenstrass, Google managed to reduce AI memory usage by 6 times. What this actually means in practice is that incredibly complex large language models can now run locally on a phone, completely offline, even if you're standing in the middle of a muddy, disconnected salvage yard. It's this specific hardware-software co-design that makes the whole thing possible. The Pixel 11 Pro leverages a 2-nanometer Tensor G6 chip paired with Android 17 and a runtime engine called Lite-RT. This allows on-device models to hit 35 to 45 tokens per second. That completely changes what is possible at the edge. It allows for real-time, multi-step reasoning without relying on cloud connectivity, essentially giving the device its own proactive agency.
So, part three, 905 Wood's Digital Refinery workflow, also known as the Sentient Bridge. Let's look at how this edge technology is actually operationalized on the ground.
95 Wood essentially built a 13-node decentralized workflow to act as this sentient bridge. First, AI handles the intake and quoting. Then, and this is where the magic really happens, the Pixel 11 Pro uses that offline edge inference we just talked about to visually classify the wood waste right at the source using a hold-to-seal cryptographic attestation. Finally, it instantly generates audit-ready 6-layer PDF document wallets. So in real time, it's converting physical, chaotic construction waste into highly structured, verifiable digital data.
Moving to part 4, automating USMCA customs compliance. Here is where we apply that micro-technology back to the macro problem of cross-border trade and tariffs that we discussed earlier.
Keep this date in mind, August 19, 2026. As Washington tightens trade policies, moving unclassified materials across the border is going to trigger catastrophic financial penalties. A 50% U.S. duty on Canadian wood? That is a business-ending tariff for logistics companies. You literally cannot afford to have a load of waste held up or misclassified at the border.
And this brings us to what we call the visual fallacy. To the naked eye, a standard mixed waste load and a 9-to-5 wood load both just look like dumpsters full of wood, but legally and financially, they are worlds apart.
The traditional, unsorted model is a massive liability. It gets hit by Doug Ford's Ontario Circle levies and Trump-era tariff penalties. But through the Edge AI classification of the Digital Refinery, that exact same wood becomes an HS 3825.0 certified USMCA wholly obtained good. It bypasses the border friction entirely because it is cryptographically attested as clean from the get-go.
Okay, Part 5, Value Shift, the DMRV Provenance Cut. This is the absolute core of today's explainer, the most crucial paradigm shift in the entire operation. The physical wood? It's actually no longer the product.
Let's anchor this to reality with the actual unit economics of what 95 Wood calls a mothership load. When you look at the breakdown, you see immediate savings on sorting levies, substantial yields from carbon dividends, and a massive 812% ROI simply from having the correct customs evidence. The total value generated here, over $8,000, completely proves that extracting digital measurement, reporting, and verification, or DMRV data, is incredibly lucrative.
This is the key takeaway you need to remember. 95 Wood's value shifts entirely to the DMRV and provenance data cut. The data, not just the wood, is the product. Because this data meets the incredibly strict, high-purity requirements of the Puro.Earth biocarbon market, the digital provenance itself becomes the revenue generator. The wood is just the physical medium. This data-first SaaS application service is exactly what secures Ontario's industrial leadership in the Canadian circular bioeconomy. And finally, Part 6, Ontario's circular bioeconomy future. Let's look at how scaling this data-first approach actually shapes the future of the industry.
The macro impact of this Sentient Bridge workflow is staggering. By operationalizing the Pix 11 Pro and the Light Art stack, we are witnessing the birth of a completely new economic paradigm. Waste is transformed into tradable Puro.Earth corks. Operators are shielded from geopolitical trade volatility and USMCA tariffs while simultaneously avoiding the impending exhaustion of municipal landfills. Edge AI has essentially redefined supply chain compliance and environmental commodities from the ground up.
I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. As we move deeper into the AI era, the physical nature of materials is becoming completely secondary to their data signatures. Think about that the next time you look at any physical commodity. If the data is the true source of value, how many other physical-heavy industries are about to become pure SaaS data plays? Keep that in mind as you watch the industrial landscape evolve. Thanks for joining us for this explainer. We'll see you next time.